Okay, let us go ahead and get started. Hello everyone, buenas tardes. Otra vez.
Buenas tardes.
Muy bien, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm Dr. Kara Snyder, Assistant Professor of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, and I have the tremendous pleasure of introducing Dr. María Inés La Greca. Today you will be hearing her talk titled Transnational Bonds Against the Anti-Gender Backlash, from Argentina's Niunamenos Movement to the global feminist and LGBTQ+ struggle for livable. By a number of people online. There'll be time. And before I introduce the speaker, I have to acknowledge the units and the people who made this talk possible. So thank you to the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program that I'm a part of, department that I'm a part of, the Liberal Studies Visiting Scholar Program, the Anne Braden Institute for Social Justice Research, the Commonwealth Center for the Humanities and Society, the Philosophy Department, the Latin American and Latino Studies Program, the Office of International Equity and Engagement Programs, and a special thanks to Jason Zarn, Annika Hogstrom, Jonathan Jabariba, Jan Rayburn, Laurie Cotter, Don Heineken, who's here with us, Kelly Walton, and Antonio Skiprianidis for all your work behind the scenes. I also want to acknowledge some compañeras who are with us online, who are part of a group that María and Inés are a part of with people in Argentina and here in the United States. So Sabrina Gonzalez, Marina Febrero, and Carolina Flores, we're missing you and wishing you were here. I'll do a quick plug for the Latin American Film Festival that's happening now. If you haven't seen any of the films, please do. I will be presenting one of the films on Friday, November 1st, a film called Cassandro about a gay lucha libre wrestler. It's a fantastic film.
Bad Bunny's in it.
Bad Bunny plays Gael Garcia Bernal's lover, so it is a great film. So please come join us. So with no further ado, let me introduce Dr. María Inés La Greca. Dr. La Greca is Associate Professor of Gender Epistemology at the National University of Febrero in Argentina. She is Assistant Researcher at the National Council for Scientific and Technical Research, or CONICET, the Director of the Interdisciplinary Gender Studies Program and Network at the Interdisciplinary Center for Advanced Studies at UNTREF. It is through this network, founded in 2015, that she found the compañeres, or comadres, for her feminist activism. La Greca also teaches philosophy in philosophy of history at the Universidad de Buenos Aires. She obtained her PhD in philosophy in 2013 with a dissertation that advances a performative interpretation on history, figuration and writing, and the work of Hayden White. In 2014, she was awarded a Fulbright Scholarship for postdoctoral research, visiting position at University of Columbia under the sponsorship of Judith Butler. La Greca has since published articles exploring issues of history, writing, gender, feminism, performativity, and subject formation. Her current research uses these theoretical tools to think with the Argentinian feminist and LGBTQ+ movements and to foster a creative and liberatory interlocution between academia and activism. In 2018, she published her first book, Escribo entre dos mujeres, I Write in Between Two Women, and in 2024, she has co-edited the volume El discurso no es del destino, debates feministas sobre el cuerpo, la naturaleza y las ciencias, or Discourse is Not Destiny. Feminist debates over body, nature, and sciences, both with Madre Selva Publishing House. Please join me in giving a round of applause for Dr. María Inés La Greca. Coffee delivered.
I'm okay standing here for the camera?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much to each and of you for coming to hear me. It's really wonderful to get to know the community of Louisville and the university. I am absolutely excited to be here, and I also want to thank the whole university, the different departments and programs that supported my visit and Andres Mendieta's visit, and especially Cara Snyder, who is a colleague and a friend, and has been in every detail for us to be comfortable, mostly because we travel with a little kid, and it's not easy, but I think that this has to do with having a feminist insight on things, that your body, your life, your caregiver tasks do not go away because you are presenting a paper. So to embrace the need to take care of people, as Cara and the university have taken care of us, is clearly a feminist standpoint. So I'm really excited. I hope you enjoy the talk. Since I'm not a native speaker, if you don't understand some word and you want to understand it, please interrupt me and say, what did you say? I don't have any problem with that because I would prefer for you to understand fully. Well, we are going to have a Q&A moment, and every question is welcome in the sense that you can ask me something challenging in point of view or wanting to know more, or if something I said you don't understand, you don't have the background, or you want for me to clarify, of course, I would love to do that. Okay, I will have a sip of coffee. Well, so I have organized my presentation in 3 parts, aiming at giving an overview of different things that have to do with the global struggles for livable life that I believe the feminist and LGBTQ plus movement are doing today. Of course, this is a point of view. It is an argued point of view in the sense that there is research behind this, but there is a lot of things that we can discuss. And also, you will notice maybe at the end of the presentation that there is a certain philosophical thinking or feminist philosophical thinking that I also propose to do about all the things, mainly because I come from philosophy, and that is one way of thinking. I understand philosophy as critical thinking. So I hope we have a moment of that. So first I will do a very brief reconstruction of 10 years of feminist and LGBTQ movement in Argentina, and I have titled this part, Changing the Narrative of Gender Violence. Then I want to do a reflection on what I call current gender talk as an effect of the Argentinian new feminist wave, and we are going to pay attention to 2 statements that are not new statements that are going on in public speeches and debates. That one is gender is a construction, or a social or cultural construction, and we are deconstructing ourselves. I don't know if this is the same in the States. That is why it's very interesting to talk to you, students and professors, to see if your experience of the debates in the US or the debates you know about has this same gender talk or this kind of statements as part of the discussion. And then I'm going to focus finally in some contemporary feminist manifestos to talk about the transnational ties of the feminist movement, and I will focus mainly in the relationship between Argentina and the USA. Okay, so let's start with the first part. Why talk about 10 years of feminist and LGBTQ movement? Well, it's not true that the feminist and the diversity movement was born 10 years ago in Argentina. If I say this, some feminists will try to kill me, and they will be right. But there was a new moment, or there was a massive re-emergence of feminism due to this famous protest slash hashtag that is Niunamenos. I don't know if you heard about this, because it went global, really. And this had to do with a protest that happened on June 3rd in 2015. Again, almost 10 years ago. Niunamenos means not one less. What you don't hear in English is the A that is the feminine presentation of one. So una in the sense of someone of a feminine kind, to say it in a general sense. So when the Niunamenos protest occurred, it was presented as a collective shout, as collectively shouted enough, basta, against gender violence. The protagonism of this Niunamenos movement, that it was also a collective of activists, a new collective, and a hashtag, so it has these different dimensions. I recommend the work of Marcela Fuentes, an Argentinian scholar working in performance studies, that has a very interesting perspective on performance constellations and protests as performance. And in that sense, I want to say something. We are now in Argentina presenting a battle against government for the defunding of our public universities. And public universities in Argentina are for free. That means that anyone can go for free and have the best education in Argentina. But we are in a moment of neoliberal economics, of catching back, and there are a lot of protests. And in those protests, for example, yesterday in the university, the National University of Arts, a very massive group of students went into a train station and did like a flash mob protesting, and that is so beautiful, because when we think about protest, we think about something that is like aggressive or disruptive, and well, sometimes you need that, but aggressiveness or disruptiveness does not mean unlawful violence necessarily. And also there are very clever and creative ways of protesting, like dancing in a train station, 100 people. So I think this is also something interesting that has to do also with the Niunamenos protest, because there were several protests, and those protests had to do with going to the street, claiming that things that had to do with gender violence had to stop. But there were also performances, there was also dancing, and there was also joy in protesting. So something of the transformative power of feminism, of sex gender activism, has to do with the anger that takes you to the street, but also the joy to find other people angry. That means, well, we don't want this, and we are going to do something about that. So there was a massive protest all across the country during this day, and initially the protest was against gender violence and femicide, and the demand was to make visible issues of gender and sexuality, inequality, violence, and discrimination, because during 2014, at the beginning of 2015, there were a lot of cases of women being killed, and not just being killed by their partner or ex-boyfriends, etc., but also a very cruel way of dying or being left in garbage bags. So there was something very cruel about this. Rita Segato, that is a famous Argentinian anthropologist, has the notion of a pedagogy of cruelty, the pedagogy of cruelty. So, and this was all over the media, and this was starting to make people say, well, we have to do something. In fact, the first action that took into the organization of the protest was somebody tweeting, this must stop, they are killing us. And from that, a group of activists and artists and intellectuals and writers, not necessarily feminists before the protest, starting organizing a protest that was huge and that was more than they would expect all over the world. So this is another interesting aspect of what I would say is the authenticity of the protest, that it wasn't organized top-down. There was a call to go to the street by some people through the media, the mass media, and especially social media, because it was a hashtag, but the amount of people that went on the street all over the country were not people responding to an authority, but people that feel interpellated by what was going on. But another demand of the third protest was to stop the cruel, morbid media portraying of the killing of women and feminized bodies, because it was what is called, I don't know if you have the term here, re-victimization, is that you are a victim and then you're a victim again of the treatment of the case of your death. And so for the media, it would be like a police case, a detective case, something that would have a lot of clicks or people watching because there's a morbidity there. And the idea was, no, but this shouldn't be so. And also there were some narratives from the media that would in some way put the blame on the murder on the very women. When she was walking in the street at such hour, etc. Well, so there was this process before the killing of women, the femicides, that is the word that was established in public discourse as naming a murder that has to do with the gender of the person. So there you already have a point of view on this is not just somebody killing somebody. This is a hierarchy in society because of which women have less value than a man. And a man can kill a woman because it is a property, but it is an object, something I can decide over her death. It's not just women and men, the issue is a more complex one, but I'm just beginning. So there was a great impact in the mass media, social media, and the public agenda, and the political debate, and institutions and academia. And also, this evolved in a relationship with other places in Latin America and the world towards 2017, where there was organized the first international international women's strike. This was organized mainly after a national strike in Argentina and in Poland, where the government was also seeking to ban the reproductive rights to abortion of women in that country. This strike, that was the first in 2017, went on the different on the following years till today. It still goes on. It became even bigger than the one on June 3rd that was also repeated several years, but then the international strike got more people to the streets. And this is something interesting in relation to the end of my talk. The name of the strike, at least in Argentina, but in other places too, started to change from women's strike to women, lesbian, trans, travesti, and non-binary people strike. So we'll see also what happens with this. And for Argentina, a country in Latin America with a great influence from the Catholic Church and some conservative sectors, especially in the Catholic Church, one of the greatest achievements of this movement was the passing of the abortion law in December 2020. So for you to get an idea, there have been a fight for abortion rights in Argentina since the 80s and organized in a national campaign since the 2000s, but the real opportunity to have the law treated, discussed in Congress and then approved was because of the movement that was going on. So the kind of people that started seeing that they wanted to support the cause of feminism and diversity. Well, this is just for you to have a look at a couple of pictures. I have happily been in every one of these protests because I was childless, so I was able to go. No, but it was really, I wasn't an activist before, and I wouldn't present myself as the great Argentinian activist. My activism has to do with my place in academia. Because sometimes when we think of activism, we think of great people, and not great people are really necessary. But activism has to do with changing what is close to you. So if I can argue in my classes why we would have a better world if we were supporting the feminist and LGBTQ movement, then it is a humble and very concrete form of activism. So that is my commitment, and I enjoy it. And also, the classroom for me is not a place where I do something to you, but a place where we do something to each other, because teaching is a transformative experience for students and for teachers. And to think with your students and to think yourself with your students is one of the things I enjoy the most. And this is the proposal also today. Well, let's go to the bad news. So what we have, I mean, conservative right-wing politics or activism is not new. First of all, it has to do with our common sense, because when we arrive at the world, we are not necessarily, we don't necessarily have a clear idea of how our common sense is not natural, but a social production of some kind of hegemony. So we can see that the conservative and right-wing way of seeing the world is very old and very strong and very organized. But there is a specific movement of this going on in the world, not just in Argentina, and you already know a lot about this too. In this moment, we are talking about, we should discuss words. Sometimes words are a way of starting naming something, to understand that, to identify that, to put it as a topic, and then we should think of our metaphors. Is it a backlash? Is it not? If it is a backlash, is that in the sense that we did something wrong and we had an effect? So there are things to think, but let's start with naming as we name. These are like popular terms or terms that we share to think about this. So the conservative right-wing backlash presents itself as fighting a gender ideology. Have you heard about this in the States? Gender ideology? Well, it is all over the world. This is sadly our president in Argentina, Javier Milei, very famous because of his outrageous comments in everywhere he was. In the conference in Davos, he spoke specifically against feminism and LGBTQ people's rights. And this other picture is of another activism related to the conservative backlash that is called "Con mis hijos no te metas," do not mess with my kids. So they are against sexual education in the school. We have a law that makes it mandatory to have sex education, but it makes it mandatory. It doesn't mean that it is in effect in every institution. And you can also see this idea of owning kids. No, they are yours. This is a patriarchal idea, a very clear one. Well, they are against the feminist and LGBTQ demands, and they also say that they are imposing a gender ideology. Okay. This is another thing that sadly you know very, very well. Being the US an example to the world of having reproductive rights and abortion rights guaranteed for women and people with a capacity for pregnancy, you don't have that anymore. So it depends where you live, if you are going to be able, in which state you live, if you are going to be able to have an abortion if you decide to, or if not. And you will say, well, why do we need abortion? Well, that's another talk. You can invite me next year. But the issue is that women and people with the capacity for pregnancy that do not want to be pregnant go ahead and do abortions anyway in unsafe conditions, and either they get ill or they die. So it is a public health issue, not just a philosophical, political discussion. Well, the federal guarantee of that right exists no more in the US. So let's start talking. So what I'm presenting is like the different characters in the narrative or in the phenomenon that we are trying to trace. So this is one first hint of our transnational bonds, in which way we are connected. See how paradoxical. Argentina, a Catholic conservative country, gets the abortion rights in the 2020 and in 2022 US lost it. And for the fight for abortion in Argentina, there was a very important symbol that was a symbol appropriated by the new feminist movement and gender and the diversity movement in Argentina. That is the green bandana or handkerchief. I don't know, I think you say bandana. And for example, when you were going to the protest, and from 2015 on, this demand for abortion started being taken up by the massive amount of people in the protest, then you will go with the bandana in somewhere in your body or in your backpack. And you will have it on your wrist, or you will have it on your neck, or you will have it in like in a pigtail, or you will have it in your backpack. And that will be also like a code within your regular life. You will be like walking around your neighborhood or a city, and you would identify somebody else just by seeing that they have the same bandana. So this is very powerful to have that connection, to see that somebody else thinks like I think that things should change. And hence, it really worked for embracing this particular demand as part of the demands of the feminist movement. And I want to talk about this because this green bandana has been taken up in the US by the current feminist activists that are fighting to get the federal right to abortion back in the US. So you immediately see there a bond. The bond is we have been ahead of this, we lost this, and then this is another thing of the historical aspect of feminism and LGBTQ rights and demands. The back and forth, there is always a negotiation on how much rights, opportunity, value a woman, a gay, a lesbian, a trans person should have in society. So there is a negotiation of this always going on. The question is why it's not something given. Why is not that everybody has the same rights as the liberal theory of the state would suppose? Well, but what I want to stress of this particular slide is that when the green bandana was invented by the group that was seeking for abortion rights, the founder of the organization said the following: green is the color of nature, was chosen because it signifies life, and we are confronted by a sector that calls itself pro-life and robs us of the world. This is very, also the bandana has to do with the white bandana for the mothers of Plaza de Mayo, but this is very interesting. Who says that is pro-life? Who is really pro-life? I remember George Carlin saying they are not pro-life, they are against women. Okay, another sad thing to show that I should say I got to know about this by talking to Cara and talking to Sabrina as colleagues and having a coffee after a workshop. I didn't know that there was a clear attempt to ban the initiatives that had to do with diversity, equality, and inclusion. So this is again like gender ideology and don't mess with my kids. So there is another part of society that wants to go back from this advancement in equality, diversity, and inclusion. Aren't we democracies? Shouldn't we not be striving for more diversity, more equality, and more inclusion, because it is the definition of democracy? Okay, so you can read Schultz-Butler and keep on hearing me, because everything has been said in their latest book, Who's Afraid of Gender. I recommend the book because it is not written as gender trouble. It's not a very difficult theoretical text that presupposes a lot of discussion of the history of philosophy and feminism. It's not that. It is a book for everyone, claiming that we are facing a difficult moment where there is an opportunity for fascist organizations of states that take gender as what makes is like the signifier, the term that causes all that is bad in society. So there are things that are bad going on, like economical and ecological crisis, and gender is the scapegoat. This is the thesis, so I recommend the text because although Butler says they are not trying to explain feminism or queer theory that are also subject to the criticism of gender ideology, they anyway make a big effort to present the outcome of a lot of decades of feminist, queer, trans, LGBTQ reflection on issues of sex, gender, and the rights of everybody to have a livable life. So I recommend the book. I think it would be a good way to start thinking profoundly about what is happening. There are also some newspaper articles that you could read. Okay, so I have 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to move a little bit faster through this to go to the end, just because I want to give you what is more important. So I don't know if that the same happened here, because you were mobilized as a society with the Me Too movement and hashtag, and there has been also a lot of discussion of sex abuse, rape and inequality of women and LGBT people and trans issues, and banning drag queens from reading to their children, etc. Banning from reading, so well. But it's a great metaphor of what happened. Okay, but in Argentina, the issue of gender exploded in mass public discussion. So you will say, well, this is not a new word, and this is not a new theory, it's an old one in some sense. Gender studies were founded in the mid-70s and 80s, mainly in US feminist theory, but everybody, for good and for bad, was talking about gender, what gender is, what is good, what is bad, etc. Well, this is a meme that is very, just for you to see that there was a broad circulation of this idea that gender is a construction, or that we are being deconstructed, etc. So what I wanted to show is that there has been, through the notion of gender, through the notion that gender is something constructed, not natural, that is not the same to talk about the sex. You may be, and that's also something to discuss, and the gender that you are, that there is no justification of gender inequality in how the bodies are or how different anatomy is in people. So that is the famous notion that biology is not destiny and that the personal is political, etc. But what I want to say is that with these notions, what has been going on, I believe, is that there was an emergence of new feminist standpoints. What I mean by this is also a notion from feminist theory. You may remember the notion by Sandra Harding, or the notion of situating knowledge by Haraway. They have to do that. It has to do with being able to see the social, unequal, and unjust dynamic for what it is, a social and unequal dynamic of power that may not be so. Because if it is a social or historical construction, then it is not necessary. So one of the feminist standpoints has to do with seeing these issues of inequality, gender, etc., but also understanding that there is a possibility for change, because this has changed along history and along different countries and places and times, and so it is something to research, it is something to think, and it is something to fight for. And now this is the part I want to focus finally. I think I'm going to be 5 minutes later. Is that okay? Well, so we were talking about transnational bans. Why are we talking about that? We are talking about that because if we live in the same world and we are in a moment of history where we are hyper-connected to each other. That doesn't mean we are talking really to each other or having real interlocution, but there is a possibility of a global conversation or a global articulation of our way of thinking who we are, what we do in this world, which is the kind of democracy of organization of power that we want. Well, this also has to do with the struggle of the feminist and LGBTQ plus movement, because it's not just a regional problem. It's a problem that has different aspects, but it goes on in different countries. So if we have in Argentina a problem, and you have it in the US, and in Chile, and in Brazil, and in Poland, and in Finland, wherever there is a way that we are still seeing that women and gay, lesbian, trans, queer people are not valued the same, and they do not get the same chances as men, well, then we can start a conversation and a political movement. And so you have here in the States a Feminist Manifesto that was published recently in 2019 in the context of the third International Women's Strike, that is the Feminism for the 99% Manifesto. Have you heard about this? No? Okay. I don't think that everything that is said there is what has to be said, but there's something that is being elaborated, there's something that is being said there that is interesting to pay attention. And also, this manifesto starts claiming that the inspiration was, first of all, the Combahee River manifesto of the 70s, and the Argentinian and Polish strikes of the feminist movement. Remember that I told you that there were national strikes and then the first international one. Okay, so what the authors that are Cynthia Russia, Kitty Bhattacharya, and Nancy Fraser probably you know more for her famous work in social theory and feminism, they say that at this moment, because of the feminist and LGBTQ protests around the world, we have an opportunity to call on all radical movements to join together in a common anti-capitalist insurgency. That is something debatable for me, in the sense that, okay, capitalism and neoliberal capitalism is the problem. I have no doubt that that is. What is anti-capitalism? What would be an anti-capitalist insurgency? That's a little bit more difficult to understand. It's more an anti-capitalist thing than a proposal or something else. But they are trying to think, well, there is a connection between the economical and the social aspect of this protest. And again, the inspiration is the Argentinian strike. In that sense, what I want to stress is the power that this massiveness in the south of America, because we are America too, had in the north and in other places of the globe. In that sense, in 2019, Judith Butler came to Argentina and had a public conversation with the Niunamenos collective, and they said something quite interesting. From the north, we are watching how you do it. So there is a recognition that there is something going on in the south that is interesting, and that is also what I want to present, not just to say, oh, we are great, but to show you that we are connected in that sense. So the manifesto has a narrative of what is going on. I'm going to read it. It presents a political diagnosis after 4 decades of neoliberalism, and they say we are witnessing another form of the inherent contradiction in capitalism, that between the production of profit and the reproduction of social life. More precisely, the cannibalization of the conditions for food, healthcare, housing, education, pensions, and so on. We are in a critical situation where human survival is at stake as the result of the neoliberal capitalist predatory form of production. What is this idea of the contradiction? Is that the more search for production of profit is possible if you predate the conditions to reproduce life, to reproduce what is needed for anybody to survive and to flourish as a human being. Then they believe that the Polish and the Argentine feminist strikers have redefined the notion of the strike. Why do they claim this? Because they say that the notion of labor, when you do a strike, what you stop is your work. You don't work anymore, you strike. You stop your labor. But the notion of labor in this moment, they say, is broader, and I agree, because the activities that are stopped by the strike are not just the traditional understood paid labor, but also, and at the same level of relevance, the unpaid labor that sustains the reproduction of life, the tasks of caregiving and household that are undertaken mostly by women, LGBTQ+ people, migrants, and marginalized people. So this may come as news, and for me it came as news because we are not educated to see this, but nobody could be here if somebody didn't take care of us when we were infants, when you cannot drink by yourself, eat by yourself, change your diaper, or even learn language. So the philosophical issue behind all this, to go clearly to the end of the presentation now, is how we are relational and interdependent subjects that are not able to live in the world, to flourish, or even to survive, if there is not somebody else helping us in different ways to be here, living, studying, who made your food, who laundered your clothes, who paid for your tuition. So in a moment you could say, well, I did everything for myself. Well, but you were what, 18, 16 at the most? All those years, who was the one not being paid for you to be able to survive? Well, you can say, well, I have a baby sister, okay, but you also had some other person that was not paid for that. So this is that there are some tasks that are paradoxically fundamental for human survival that are not recognized as fundamental. And profit that is relevant, but you don't need profit to eat. You need food to eat, or you need breastfeeding to eat when you're a baby. Well, that takes up the protagonism of the economic way of seeing reality. So they go to action, feminist and non-feminist radical movements around the world to articulate their struggles. And again, this will be the issue of the international goals. So there have been people writing from their places in academia and as activists say, well, we have now an opportunity because people are awake. You have this term woke here, that is a very interesting term, but it's also used against you or the ones that are feminists. But it's the idea that now you see something that you didn't see before. So this is a moment for transformation. And another important thing that they claim, and this has to do with the history of feminism, is that the articulation, the kind of organization of our struggle should be thought in relation to a subject, the one who is taking the action forward, non-homogeneous, plural, and diverse, in the sense of not placing one kind of person as the protagonist or the only person that could do this, because this is a discussion regarding the notion of women and the subject of feminism. We can get into that if you would like. So they talk about the new open-ended universalism. Always information, always open to transformation and contestation, and always establishing itself anew through solidarity. So in this new open-ended universalism, they are considering a call for feminists, LGBTQ+ people, but also migrants, also indigenous people, anti-racist activists, ecological and other radical activists. In Argentina, we also have some manifestos, and they are previous to the US one. And in fact, one of them has the signature of the people writing the US manifesto in them. And this is the collection, the edited volume of the public statements of the Niunamenos collective from 2015 and 2018. And they have some coincidences with the Feminism for the 9% manifesto, but the first one I have presented has a more close or full-blown narrative on the diagnosis, on the way to go, and this one is more like tracing an evolution of what the protests were presenting as the reflection of the movement. So, for example, they talk of a process of political subjectivation. What does it mean? This means that people are getting as the form of a political subject. They are going through a process where they leave something behind, like they deconstruct themselves, and they choose to be or to act in another way. And then there's there are more manifestos, but I also mentioned here Apuntes para la Militancia, Notes for Activism of María Villalopez, who was part of the collective, Niunamenos collective, and previously a public intellectual also. And here's something that is what I want to end my presentation with, as I said, in a philosophical way. So look at what this paragraph reflecting on what happened with the protest and what happens to people that became feminists or became involved in feminism and LGBT plus struggles. Look at what they say, what María Villalopez says. We know that when we say women, we are naming a political construction that includes lesbian, travestis, and trans people. Women is the quicker name of our public appearance, but at the same time that we use it, we put it on the verge of explosion, for it shows what it entails and what it conceals. Transfeminism have taught us, through the public appearance of their bodies, that everybody is a political construction, and that to take charge of your own, we have to deconstruct it, even when gender is associated to a biological origin, to know that no one is born a woman, that we are produced as such, but that we also produce ourselves when we give ourselves a voice and a discourse, when we demand recognition and respect. We won't get back to the prison house of womanhood as a given identity. That is not enough for us. So this really interesting paragraph sums up a lot of the critical elaboration of feminist and queer theory in the past decades, and what shows us that relates to the manifesto and to the current struggle is that there is an awareness of the different ways we can be a body or become a body, an embodied subject, and how these different forms of inhabiting a body, of being a body, are called as part of a diverse movement, not just a movement that has to do with women defined in a closed way, but of everybody who feels threatened in their embodied existence. And in that sense, I want to mention here this famous, the most relevant travesti. I can tell you something about the word travesti that is not transvestite in Argentina, the travesti activist Loana Berkins, that is holding a sign that says, I had an abortion. And this is previous to the time of the new feminist movement. Loana Berkins was not physically able to have an abortion because she was a travesti person. But she is holding the sign. What does that mean? And why does it connect what I said before? Because you don't have to be the subject that is interested in the specific demand to understand that a demand is something that you should support. So for the travesti movement, having the abortion law wasn't immediately an interesting thing as individuals, but as part of a society that should acknowledge the autonomy of women's and people with the capacity of pregnancy bodies. They were supporting that because they knew a lot about not being able to own your own way of embodying. Do you see the point? Okay. And so this is the point. Acknowledging and defending embodied social systems. In the Feminist 99% Manifesto, we have seen that they talk about this articulation of alliances between feminist and non-feminist radical activists, and they say that this opportunity or this moment has to do with the redefinition of the strike, and what is that we understand then by that redefinition of the strike that is not just paid labor, but also the unpaid labor that sustains social life. That in this moment, certain social groups are suffering more than others, the attack on social reproduction that they are talking about. And social reproduction is or encompasses activities that sustain human beings as embodied social beings who must not only eat and sleep, but also raise their children, care for their families, and maintain their communities, all while pursuing their hopes for the future. These people making activities occur in one form or another in every society. So, to end up my presentation, some concluding remarks about these transnational bonds. I think that one of the things we can understand here, and that it has to do with the rhetorics of public discussion between the conservative backlash and the anti-gender movement and the feminist and LGBTQ+ movement, is there is a dispute also, there is this debate over which is the rhetoric, which is the way of naming what we are, who we are, how we are. And neoliberal rhetorics talk of us as discrete and self-sufficient individuals. The feminist movement started by understanding that the personal is political. So we are able to see the power relations that produce the personal experience of gender, violence, and its collective social nature. To reject the neoliberal ideas of individuality, meritocracy, self-sufficiency, and to reduce these issues to personal deficiency or failure is part of what the neoliberal frame of mind is about. So, naming systematic oppression and exploitation is a way to understand that these kind of issues are collective issues and not just the good luck or the bad luck or my being able to solve things or not in life, or my success or my personal failure. That is why we talk about gender violence, femicide, patriarchy, heteronormativity, and cis-sexism. And so, what I think that the feminist movement is in favor is of the collective perspective on relationality and interdependency to sustain human and non-human life in the planet. Without that relationality that has made us what we are, there is no way to understand the inequalities and why we should be supporting demands that maybe are not directly affecting myself as a white, in Argentina, white, cis, hetero woman. See the point? The example of Luana Bertens. So, to conclude, we are the ones for life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, María. We have about 20 minutes for question and answer, and I will let whoever would like to speak first raise their hand and ask their first question.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, please go. And if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I was wondering, what was the women in Argentina, what was their reaction when they heard that Roe v. Wade was overturned?
Solidarity, immediate solidarity, because the national campaign for abortion rights is absolutely connected to other campaigns, to other networks in the world that are fighting for that. So it was clearly a disgrace for everybody to lose this kind of precedent, and immediately there was the offer to support in several ways. For example, there have been demonstrations in Argentina, protests in Argentina against what is happening here. So in that sense, it was an immediate from the, when I was preparing the talk, I said, well, I should talk about feminisms because it's not just an only one single closed movement. There are debates, there are things that divide feminists within. We were talking yesterday in our dinner about trans-exclusionary feminists or radfem. We can talk about that also. But there are things that also make people that have different opinions to have the same one, and that would be abortion rights. Because for me, it took a long to understand what the claim to abortion rights means, because I was a Catholic, and I was a believing, practicing Catholic, and when you are formed that way, well, you know, Mary had Jesus, and she didn't have sex for that, there was an angel, so that messes up your head. I did a lot of therapy. But the thing is that you don't own your body when you are pregnant. It's because something that transcends you, that is the life of a human being, is in you. And there's something there very difficult to take out of your subject formation, and a lot of things have to happen to understand that. And even if you're never gonna get an abortion because you decide not to, that doesn't mean, this is again the point of the lecture, that other people should not be able. So I can have the possibility of abortion and never, because I don't feel so, because I don't think so, because I don't believe the scientific arguments that prove that there is no human being, or the political notion of personhood, that is a institutional decision over when life is human and when life is not human. So without all those complex arguments that would support the idea that women and people with the capacity to pregnancy should be able to decide till a certain amount of weeks of pregnancy to not follow pregnancy, I could never take that opportunity for myself for an ideological or personal decision. But social life is not my personal and my opinion. It's the collective well-being that is being thought of. So in that sense, I think that it is key to have what I would believe is a full-blown feminist framework in your mind to understand that the autonomous character of the decision of your own body is your human right. As it is the human right of a person that was to transition to another gender than the one assigned at birth. Andrés Mendieta, the professor that presented, the graduate student that's going to be a professor, I hope, that presented earlier, made me understand that the autonomy of our body as being able to decide on our body as other people do is something that unites feminist and trans struggles. I decide what to do with my way of living in this body, insofar as I don't do violence to anyone else. Abortion has its tricky things of is there a human being or not, but well, then you have the arguments. And again, you have to have public policies and laws for everybody, not for the ones that think one way or the other. It's not easy, but in that sense, again, just answering again, there was, I think it is an event where the conservative right-wing movement won at this time. And they won quietly, doing the internal work to get into the Supreme Court, to have an excuse to rule something and then erase these 4 decades of rights. So maybe we should learn from the right that they are clever than us sometimes. Thank you for your question. Yes.
What was the prevalence of femicide in Argentina? Is it common, or is it?
Well, I think that Latin America in general has high rates of femicide, and it varied through the years, but I will give you a rough estimate.
Okay.
Like one woman is killed every 30 hours.
Yeah. In Argentina or in Latin America?
In Argentina. In Latin America, there are places worse, and not so well, but so, and this is another issue. What's your name?
My name is Paul.
Paul, thank you for your question. It is tricky, the issue of numbers, because you will say, well, but there are other kind of deaths that are a higher number. Well, but because men like to kill each other, too, or because there are violent deaths of men in the hands of other men in some specific situation. So what I want to say is that the number is relevant. One of the demands of the 2015 protest was to have official numbers. There were not official numbers of the amount of women that were. There was an NGO that would follow the numbers, but there was not an official record. Then they created an official record. There was also, as a part of the achievements of the feminist movement, we had in 2020 the creation of a gender, women, and diversity ministry that has been eliminated by the current president in Argentina. So, but what I say is that the number is something quite relevant to give you, for example, it's like one woman a day, something like that. That is a lot. But if we were one a week, the problem is not that a woman dies every 40 hours or 48 hours. The problem is if she dies because of being a woman. That is gender violence. Gender violence is that the reason, the social reason behind a death is in a structure of inequality. In that sense, when I have to teach this, what I have to explain to people, because there have been a lot of rejection of this new vocabulary from the feminist movement. Why do I have to say femicide? Why is not just a murder? And that terminological difference is the whole political point. To understand that femicide does not have to do mainly with me walking in a dark alley and then somebody that I don't know kills me. They have to be with the most frequent perpetrator of a femicide is somebody, a guy, that has a relationship with you. So it has to do with establishing a power through that relation, an ex-boyfriend, a father. There's a famous killing of a lesbian woman by the father of the girlfriend, for example. She was killed because of being a lesbian, not because of just being there as somebody. See, so this is, it's debatable, and it's okay to debate, but it's also interesting to see what lets you see what in your society. In the end, what you are mapping is what kind of society are we? And sometimes the answer is not as pleasant as we would like. I hope I answered your question, but thank you. Yes?
How correlated is that in Argentina with gun control? Because here it's very high.
Well, one of the demands of the people supporting the current president is to be able to have a gun, anyone, in any place. We don't have your culture of having guns everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know the correlation. I should trace that and give you a proper answer. But in fact, sadly, a lot of femicides that have been famous have not occurred with guns. Fire, setting on fire a woman, strangling, how do you say apuñalar? Stabbing. The creativity to femicide is a lot. So, but your question is a good one to understand the specificity of the issue in each country. So you have that problem as part of the problem.
Yeah.
We don't. I would say we don't have that in Argentina because it's not that you have unrestricted access to guns. For me, it's very interesting and scary when I walk in a university campus and see in the library that is forbidden to enter with a gun, and I say, and people should arrive at the door of the library with a gun. Well, I know that you have that, and this is part of your culture. So that's an interesting thing to look into, how it is what I was saying about abortion and being and understanding why it's okay that people have that right. Why it's not okay that people have the right to have a lot of weapons? Well, but it's a cultural thing, so it has been built into the subjectivity of US citizens for thousands, not thousands, sorry, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
How, and it's the same as patriarchy or racism. How do you undo hundreds of years of reproducing the same? It's difficult, but it has been done, and it can still be done, but it goes back and forth, and there are other factors to take into account. So yes, a very good question. I would like to look that up in my country when I go back about what happened with girls. Thank you. Yes.
Just to follow up from the previous question and talk about the language.
Yes.
So Spanish, Italian, we are gendered languages.
Yes.
So some of the, you said something that really struck me about hesitation about how to name. And I think that's important right now. I think there is a historical justice in being hesitant when we name. And as far as my language is concerned, there has been a lot of pushback towards gender-neutral pronouns. They're so clumsy, also sometimes in Italian, to go towards a gender-neutral kind of terminology. And there is pushback also towards against the domination of English and its formulaic way of speaking, which in some fields, and gender studies one of them, is something that from different cultures, is being attacked or debated. So that is kind of an interesting issue that has to do with cultural specificity, with how each country will have its own forms of activism, also when it comes to gender struggle. What is the work that is being done on language in Argentina?
That's a very great question. Thank you. It's a fascinating issue for us to research the humanities, and it's huge. It's like a person, it is. Not so politically so, because it is the resistance to acknowledge sexism, homophobia, and transphobia as an idea goes hand in hand with the resistance of new forms of language against that impregnates language. But in Spanish, I guess Italian should be very close because we are related as Romance languages. There has been a strong, so it's like a shibboleth, a password between activists to talk in a certain way. So, for example, when I teach gender, people that come to a gender class are already very convinced about something, and I address my students as a universal, when I use a general or universal noun with the E. So, if I say todos, everyone, in Spanish, that is the legal or institutional way of saying a universal noun for everybody, todos, with the O, that is the mark of the masculine gender. But it's also the universal one, and this is called androcentrism. But it's also something empirically established by linguists. So how does the lang work? The lang work using the masculine to speak to everybody. Well, because the linguists and the ones in power to talk in public were men. So there's a history even of the rule of the grammar or the language. So when you want to, if everybody here was female, I would say todas. So there is the feminine one. One way of trying to be politically aware of this in legal documents would be to say todo /as. So you read todo like the two options. But the more political incisive way, the more challenging way from activism, and I have to make a clarification of this, is the use of the E. The E is not a rule in any book of the Royal Academy of Spanish that decides how we use or we don't use the word. So I would say in my gender class, hola todes. Or I would say alumnes, not alumnos or alumnas. And it's difficult because I am 44 and I have been using the O or the A for what? 35 years old. Yeah, sorry. So it's an effort, but everything that has to do with the struggle for more democracy, equality, and diversity is an effort because it doesn't feel natural. It feels, it is to do the effort and to be clumsy and to be uncomfortable with the hesitation is the political action. So, and this is like another kind of politics. It's a more humble politics. There's something complicated there because they are so strong and they appeal to people, the conservative and the right wing today, appeal to people because they are phallic. They are strong. They are the ones with the big, and it still works metaphorically. So then you have the issue of the philosophy and the ethics, and then you have this rhetoric and how does it work? And also, for example, you can go. I always use the example, I hope my mom is not listening to this, of the family meeting. And if I go to my family meeting, where not everybody is a family, and I say, hola todos, somebody is going to say, and also because it feels like an imposition. Why are you trying to make me speak differently? Of course I'm trying to make you speak differently. I'm not pushing. Why can I not do it? Why does it bother? Why? So, I mean, it's fascinating, but I should say something to make epistemic, to do epistemic justice. What's called in Argentina inclusive language is not of feminist making. Is something already done by the intersex and trans activism previous to the 2015. So, for example, I received a master thesis project that somebody wanted me to be the advisor. And I read it, and they were doing like me. Oh, the big feminist movement, and it's starting here and there, and they were talking about the inclusive language. No, that's not the proper history. The proper history of having the possibility of intervening the gender aspect of noun is previous to the feminist movement and is an accomplishment or a production of intersex and trans activism. The gender identity law in Argentina, that is a fabulous and unique law that we have, was approved in 2012. So it's previous to the Niunamenos Movement. See, so you have also, because then cis women put themselves again in the hegemony of the vision or have a cis-centric notion of things. So the issue of language is great. I think that there is resistance, and I was telling Cara that I will be presenting a paper next year on a famous debate between Beatriz Sardo, that is a very well-known literary scholar, a very respected intellectual, public intellectual, and a linguist that I never remember his name, Kalinowski is the last name, that they had a public debate on the issue of inclusive language. And the linguist and the public intellectual, very left-wing intellectual, said, why should I be imposed this? Why should I talk like that? And this is not the way that the land functions, all that those arguments. And the linguist said, well, but language is used. So the reconstruction of a notion of what language is an abstraction for very diverse. Spanish is abstraction. Something that you talk to so many parts of the world cannot be the same thing in everywhere, although there are, as systems, I would say, fabulous tendencies. But language change and society change. One of the things that I'm not so enthusiastic about of changing the language is believing that there you have won a great battle and then you can go on with business as usual. So I say and then keep on with my racism and homophobia and I don't know, or privilege. I mean, the problem with being interpreted and deciding to keep on being interpreted by this kind of fundamental deconstruction of your subjectivity is that it's a lot of work. You get in trouble, you fight with people, somebody doesn't understand you, you are the crazy one in the discussion. So, but well, social change even comes or from comfortable beings. So to embrace that uncomfortable feeling and that presentation as an ethical commitment, not to decide on advance what gender you are. But we walk through life, since we become part of the culture, deciding that there are two kinds of people, women, men, and they are going to be heterosexual. So it's a visual clue. How do you undo a visual clue? Well, it's not the same when you are not feeling as part of what you are demanding to see. What happens if I don't see myself as what other people say I should do? So then you have to use those experiences. You are not going to leave everything behind because some aspect of yourself may not be in question. But the experience of the other is the possibility of seeing the plurality of the way of value. So there are not just women and men in the world. There are more kind of ways of living the body. And the difficult stuff is to understand that we all have the same value, or we should. But well, I mean, this is a feminist, and then you said it from the start.
That's a wonderful note, actually, to ask Dr. María Inés any questions. We're going to go here for a few more minutes. Thank
Hi, there's a question. So you kind of brought up a little bit about
You went over